All right, today's going to kind of feel a little bit like a math class just because we're going to be using a lot of the tools you probably learned in previous math classes. And you might be thinking like, why are we doing that? Well, up until this point, we've been launching things either straight up or straight to the right or straight to the left. And you can imagine that sometimes we launch something that's kind of going up and to the right. So it's going to have a little bit of this, it's going to have a little bit of that. You're going to realize, oh, that forms a triangle. like, you're like, I don't like that. Well, you're gonna like it because it's kind of cool because it's gonna involve some of that great math you've learned with sine, cosine, and tangent. But we're gonna apply it to projectiles, which are things kind of launched at an angle, just like that. Okay. So the first things first, we have to talk about the basics. And if you haven't talked about this math in a long, long time, that's a-okay. I'm gonna go blue. That's a-okay because we're going to talk it through right now. And if you're like, this is pretty easy, well, just enjoy it being easy, and it's not that hard of a worksheet. And so, but if it is hard for you because you've been doing it a long time, you can slow down the video and rewatch things and it'll make sense. Okay, so we have three trig operations we can do. We can do sine of theta, and sine is your opposite side of the triangle. We'll talk about this over the hypotenuse of the triangle, which is the longest side of the triangle. All right, so write these down. We'll have the tools at the top of our paper or at the top of your iPad, and then we'll use them. The cosine function here is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And the last one you can use is called tangent. Tangent of theta. And I shouldn't say last one. It just, you pick whichever one you want based on the information you're given. Tangent of theta is the opposite side of the triangle divided by the adjacent. And this was always kind of hard for people to remember, so they made a little mnemonic device that you can kind of use. I'm going to erase this just to get myself some more space here. There's something, and you've seen it before. It's called SOHCAHTOA. So, that's a bad H. SOHCAHTOA. And if you don't have these three things off to the left here memorized, you can say, oh, sine, that's the S right there. Sine is the S, that's the opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse. The cosine is your adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse. The tangent operation is your opposite side of the triangle divided by your adjacent. So if you don't ever have these memorized, that's a-okay. Probably on your test, maybe I can give you a little cheat sheet or give you a little note thing, but you got to have these at the top of your paper because it's going to be helpful. And if you don't remember them, you can always write down SOHCAHTOA at the top of your paper, and that'll help as well. So we're just going to do part of each little section of the worksheet here, and you'll finish up the parts we don't do. But let's take a little look. I'm going to switch my colors. I'm going to go, purple. There we go. So we're going to look at this triangle right here. Boom. And we're going to say it has sides, or it has angles, capital A, B, and C. And then it's got sides length 12, 9, and the hypotenuse is 15. And remember, the hypotenuse is just the longest side of the triangle. So in this case, it's 15. And they don't have any labels on there. We will eventually deal with labels, and we're launching things through arrow, probably meters per second. But it says, for number 1, find the sine of angle A. So right here, angle A is just like that. And sometimes they'll call it theta. They can call it different letters, but oftentimes it's called theta. So that's telling you the sine of angle A. So everything's referenced relative to angle A. So I go up to sine, and I say, oh, sine, that's whatever the opposite side is divided by the hypotenuse. So I'm at angle A right here, boom, and the opposite side of that is the number 9. So I write that down. It's the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse in this case is 15. That's the longest side of this triangle is 15. So it's 9 divided by 15. That's a bad 15. Let me erase that, make it a better 15. Got that, 15. So 9, which is the opposite side, divided by 15, which is the hypotenuse, opposite of hypotenuse. And so I did not mean to write on my triangle. I just want to show you the opposites just straight across. And not to confuse opposite with adjacent. Opposite is across from the angle, and adjacent is whatever side is right next door. All right? So that's all that is. It'll just be the opposite 9 divided by 15. I don't know why I'm circling that. You don't need to circle that. Well, we'll just circle it. If you want to reduce that down to 3 over 5, that's a-okay. You can divide the top and bottom by 3. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So you can write it as 3/5 as well. All right. So we're going to take a look at the tangent of B for number 2. So I'm going to erase my theta right here because we're talking about a new angle. We're going to go over to the angle B, and I'll make my theta right here. I'll switch colors just to, be a little fancy. So this will be angle B. And now, in this situation for number 2, everything's going to be referenced relative to angle B. So tangent, if you go back up to here, tangent is the opposite side over the adjacent. So the opposite side relative to B here is the number 12. So I'm going to say 12 divided by adjacent, which is 9. Adjacent just means right next door. So opposite's really easy. It's just whatever is across from the angle. Adjacent's whatever is right next door to the angle, just like that. So let's say 12 over 9. And I need to erase some things. It's getting all messy. But the big thing is when you're talking about the tangent of B, it's referenced relative to that angle B right there. So it's opposite over adjacent. And if you want to remember, TOA goes with tangent opposite over adjacent, or you can just write it out right here like we did opposite over adjacent. So it's 12 over 9. If you want to reduce that down, that'd be 4/3. So that is the tangent of B. And then we're going to rock on to the cosine of B. So I'm not going to mess with my angle at all because we already have the theta right at B right there. So let's leave it B. No pun intended. Sorry, I thought that was funny. And cosine, the cosine operation says take your adjacent side divided by your hypotenuse. So here's our angle. It's at B because they were talking about the cosine of B. And adjacent just means whatever's the side right next door. So in this case, it'll be the number 9 divided by the hypotenuse, which is just the longest side of the triangle right there. So it'll be 9 over 15. And if you want to reduce that down to 3/5 again, that's A-okay. And you might notice in here, the sine of angle A is equal to the cosine of angle B. That's a math thing. We don't need to worry about too much, but that's just kind of neat. Okay, so that's how you go about finding the sine, tangent, and the cosine. What you should do on your own is do questions 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to rock on, and we're going to do number 7, then we'll call it a video. And let's cross off some things here. We're not going to do number 10. We can skip number 11. Let's skip number 12. And let's skip number 14. Yeah, we don't need to do that. Number 15, cross off. 16. 17. I just want to get the fireman question. You can try the firewoman question right there. I'm going to cross off 19. Fire person question. That's what we should call it. All right. So we're going to go. We're just going to do number 7 and call it a day. And the rest of them you can try on your own. I do think that number 18 is going to be a little bit tougher, so don't stress if you can't get it today. So let's try number 7. And I redrew number 7. You're not going to have enough space for 7, 8, and 9 in that little section right there. So I redrew number 7 down at the bottom here. So we have 17, and I'll zoom in right there. This side, the hypotenuse was 17. We had 55 for an angle, and we had M, L, and N, just like that. So we're going to look at, what number was this again? This was number 7. We're going to do number 7 together. And then you can take numbers 8 and 9 and finish those off. So we are looking for the letter M. Now, this gets a little confusing at first because you're like, okay, we have a brand new triangle and we're feeling good. And they say we want to find letter M, which relative to 55 degrees, you're like, oh, that is the opposite side. That is the opposite side of the triangle relative to 55 degrees because it's straight across, just like that. And we're like, but we also know nothing about the adjacent, the next door side, so we're not going to mess with that at all. We know the opposite, check, we got that. We know the long side of the triangle right here, which is the hypotenuse. So we know the opposite, and we know the hypotenuse. Those are the two things we know. We know we want letter M, that's the opposite, and we know the number 17. So then we go up to here, and we're like, okay, which involves the opposite and the hypotenuse? Well, it looks like sine does, right? Because it involves the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine involves adjacent and hypotenuse, and we don't know anything about the adjacent side. We don't know anything about that. Here, let's put a question here. We don't know anything about that side, so we're going to leave that be. And so we know we're involving the opposite and the hypotenuse, so we know that's going to be a sine. And tangent's opposite and adjacent, and once again, we know nothing about the adjacent side. So we know we're going to involve the opposite and hypotenuse sides of the triangle. So sine of theta equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. In this case, our opposite side is going to be the letter M divided by the hypotenuse. So remember, the opposite's the letter M divided by the hypotenuse, which is the number 17, equals the sine of theta. In this case, theta was 55 degrees. And you're like, whoa, that's good. We have the letter M involved because that's what we're looking for. So that makes us happy. We have the number 17. We have the 55. And make sure your calculator's in degree mode. And we'll talk more about that. But they have this symbol degrees right there. So I'm in degree mode. Now, we're looking for letter M. But right now, we're dividing M by 17. So we have to undo dividing by 17. So how do you undo dividing by 17? Well, we have to times by 17 on both sides. So in this case, M is going to be equal to 17 times the sine of 55. And if that bothers you, you're like, what the heck is the sine of 55? You just do it on your calculator. The sine of 55. I punch it in. I'm in degree mode. Is 0.82. So that's about 0.82 times 17. And I get 13.92. So this works out. You do your calc there is about 0.82. And this is times 17. Let's put 17 here. And you get that for an answer. You get 13.93 when I round. And I'm not going to bust you if you call it 13.92, but 13.93, that's my letter M. Check. Just like that. And the first thing we did, though, we said we draw our triangle and we identify what side we're interested in and what side we're given. So in this case, we were interested in the opposite side and we were given the hypotenuse. So I said, okay, we have the opposite and we have the hypotenuse. And I said, what trig function is that going to be? Opposite and hypotenuse. I said, oh, that's sine. The other ones had adjacent in there. We didn't know anything about the adjacent side. So I'm like, okay, so the sine of some angle is opposite divided by hypotenuse. And in this case, our angle is 55. So we did that, equals opposite, which is m divided by 17. And I said, hey, we got to get the 17 out of the bottom, so I times by 17 on both sides. And then we just get our number here, 17 sine of 55, you get about 13.93. So what I want you to do, go ahead, let's have you finish up number 8. You'll have to do some work at the bottom of the page, number 9. You can skip all of those. Solve the triangles. Let's see here. You could even skip this one. You can even skip number 13 if you want, because to be honest, it's not super important today. I'd rather have you focus on 8 and 9. And then if you want to try 18, that'd be awesome. But the big ones, let's make sure we get the ones circled in pink here. 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9. So make sure you try 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9. And then if you're feeling great, try 18. All right, well, hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you can read my messy stylus handwriting. It's one of my first times making a video with the stylus, so I'll only get better, I think. Thank you for watching.